So in today's episode, we have Andrea, one of the remote nurse experts in finding jobs, and we go over everything on what you might need to land that remote job that you're looking for, potential salaries of how high you could go, and the pros and cons of going into work from home nursing. So guys, get ready for this one because it's great. It's a short one. So again, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy it, and let's jump right into the video. Okay, guys, we have Andrea, the remote nurse job search expert, exactly from her Instagram. So, Andrea, before we get into everything you do, how did you get started in nursing?
I never really knew exactly what I wanted to do right out of high school, but I had a friend's mom who had been through a really long battle with bone cancer. And I was over her house one day taking care of her, doing some things, and she just said, I think you'd be a really amazing nurse. And I didn't think too much of it, but I was right out of high school. I just went to community college right away, and I saw a poster like on the board in the hallway that was for a CNA class. And I took the 6 week like night CNA
Mhm.
class and started working as a CNA, and that's kind of how I got into nursing.
And then, so you got into CNA, and then do you think being a certified nurse assistant, right? That's CNA.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you think that helps with translating into nursing?
I mean, I think that it helped me realize that that was what I wanted to do,
Hmm.
but, everybody's path is is different. Some people just kind of know that right away and I didn't, so it
Hmm.
was helpful for me to have that experience in that area to kind of give that validation that because I just didn't know like, do I want to go to vet school? Do I want to? I love animals. So I just didn't really know what I wanted to do, and that was a really good way for me. I met a lot of great people. It helped me feel more comfortable too in like nursing school because I already had that clinical
Yeah.
experience, so I wasn't like afraid to go take care of patients and all that stuff. So it
And
just
and
gave me
then,
a good experience. Yeah.
what was your first like nursing job?
I wanted to go straight into critical care. So originally wanted to do CRNA school.
Hmm.
And I kind of had that in my mind as I was doing that. So I hit the path to hitting critical care like right away. So I started out on a like PCU slash
Okay.
ICU area. And I was supposed to be able to go work directly in the ICU after I got my bachelor's because I did a 2 year program to start with.
Hmm.
And then I worked full time night shift and finished my bachelor's in 1 year. And then I didn't really get to go in there the way that I wanted to. So I found another job that I could work in CVICU. So I relocated like 9 hours away from where I grew up and to go work in that job. And then just that's kind of where I got into informatics too, because it was in the early 2000s.
Hmm.
And that was just kind of like the early implementation of all the EHRs. And so
Yeah.
that's when I steered away from a CRNA school. But I'd done so many different things in nursing, like so many different areas.
So what like sparked your interest in informatics? Just the
I
EHR?
Well, I took a leave of absence at my staff job, and I took a contract, a travel contract, and I didn't know when I went there, they were actually a beta testing site for a very large EHR that they was starting to implement. And so when I went back to my staff job, and one of the nurses that was doing a lot of the design meetings, they were implementing that same software program. She asked me if I would help her out since I had used it before, and it
Hmm.
just grew from there. Yeah, I realized that I had a lot of skills, like techie skills, that I really liked doing that workflow analysis and just all the things that came with doing that. And that's how I got started in it. It was just the right timing, I guess.
How did you switch your brain from like, I guess, doing all like the critical care type care and then being like, okay, let's go into this more tech type nursing?
I had a very supportive manager and team. So, like, I didn't just leave bedside. It was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So, I got to work still in bedside while also doing all of those meetings and those design meetings. And it was really, I guess, just interesting because you knew how much it was going to affect your workflow. And this is all new. You have to remember, like, we were all paper charting.
Yeah.
I think we had like a DOS pharmacy system we would chart our meds in, but like everything is on paper, the trifold sheet, like
Yeah, I remember
orders, everything.
that.
So,
I think the new
um,
nurses don't understand what we went through.
no, no, in some ways it was really nice, but in other ways it was challenging. But yeah, it was just really nice, fun. I found it fun to like just sit and see how all this was going to unfold and watch it. I think I had a different perspective because I had been at a beta testing site where they already had it up and running, and so I had a different perspective from the other nurses that were just kind of had no idea what to expect with
Oh
it.
yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. Like, I went to school up in Buffalo, New York, and they started rolling out like Epic electronic charting first there, and then so I already knew how to use it from just doing all my clinicals. And then when I went to the hospital that I work in now, they were just switching over to Epic maybe like 3 years or 2 years after I graduated. And then everyone's like, "Oh, how do you already know all this stuff?" I was like,
Yeah.
I kind of used it. It's just clicking through."
Right.
but but I never went as far as like you did and did like the super user type stuff where I probably could have had a different career path, but I
Yeah.
probably should have now looking back at it.
It's a good area to get into. It really is. Yeah.
And then how did you get into remote nursing?
I actually went back to patient care. So I was doing a leadership position in informatics at a pretty young age. I was in my 20s. And so I just had like, I wanted more control over my schedule to do other things.
Mm.
I was doing a lot. Like I had scaled really fast in 5 years with a master's degree and in a leadership role. And I just kind of wanted, I guess I was ready for a break. Maybe I did too fast. So I actually did travel nursing on and off for a while. I'm like, I just want to do what works for me in my season of life. And so um, I did maybe just PRN jobs. I went to the West Coast. I was all over California, Washington. Like I was just doing what I
What
wanted
you
to do
want to
for
do?
that season of life. Yeah, and that was the jobs that worked for that. But it kind of inspired me to start thinking like there has to be something out there that I could do that I could just take with me and not like after a while travel nursing is great, but it's hard to find housing, especially if you have
Mm.
pets and then like you have to match the housing dates with contract dates and like just kind of gets it's doable, but it kind of got exhausting after a while. So it started just a process of me thinking of like what can I do that I can just take something with me and I can travel if I want to. And so that's when I started really researching all the different. I knew the opportunities were out there, having been in informatics and been exposed to a lot of the non-traditional nursing jobs like very early on. And
Mhm.
I had connections with nurses that have were vendors or all the different medical device companies and all those things. So like I knew those options were out there, but I just wasn't ready for them at the time. So when I was ready, I jumped in. It's probably like I think 2017. I got like a PRN remote kind of triage follow-up job, and I discovered very quickly I do not want to be on the phone all day working from home. So uh, I started looking into other options and just kind of targeted my role towards. I really wanted to do like fraud, waste, abuse, medical coding, and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So that those were the roles that I was targeting, and I landed one in 2019 that I started full time doing that.
So obviously I have like zero knowledge on the remote nursing other than knowing you and a few other people that do remote nursing. So how do
Yeah,
you find out all those different specialties that might pique your interest?
I don't. I That's a really great question because like now there's so many resources out there and so many other like YouTube channels and blogs and websites that you can
Mhm.
find that information on. I think the way I found out about it was just like networking because 2016 like you didn't have all these resources out there
Yeah.
when I
No.
really started like trying to figure out what I could do. So first things that came up were like legal nurse consulting. And when I started looking at like, insurance companies, I just started looking at the job titles. I just started looking at the jobs. They were not easy to find. They were buried. You didn't have this like nice little remote filter that you can
Yeah.
filter them out, and or hybrid. And the job descriptions weren't really like descriptive. So I had just reached out to people that I knew and started asking and eventually started kind of figuring out, you know, paths that I could take and options that were there that kind of aligned with what I wanted to do. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mm.
And for like since for the most part, every time I interviewed like a remote nurse, what are the pros for you? Like what are like the super positives for you for now working from home?
Yeah. So I think I started it originally because like I wanted to take the job with me wherever I wanted to go. But that season of life, changes when you become a mom, have a parent. And so for me, logistically with us, like where we live kind of in a rural area and my husband travels for work, childcare was a really big issue for us. So that's probably why I stayed, in that area of remote nursing or why I initially was really trying to stay in it.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of pros for me, I guess, because I live rurally. I don't want to commute. I was originally commuting over an hour
Oh
just in
wow.
driving time to go to work. That's not counting like traffic and then finding parking and walking in the garage and all that stuff. So um, it was just like the logistics of things and not having. I felt like I just didn't have control over my schedule in the hospital being a staff nurse sometimes. Like wait for vacation, or someone's got more seniority, or you've got weekends and
Yeah.
holidays. And I think I'd done that for so long. I was just kind of ready for something different.
Yeah, so like that,
Mm.
I guess that's where we could be super similar. Me and my wife were just talking like, oh man, childcare is tough. We have two kids. They're
Yes.
like 3 and 2 years old, and we're both working full-time schedules. We're like, should one of
Tough.
us do a work from home job? Like, is that the play?
Oh,
But
your wife's
then,
a nurse too?
yeah, she's a nurse too. She's
Oh,
an
awesome.
oncology nurse.
Mhm.
Like during COVID, because she was pregnant at the time, um, they let her do kind of like remote nursing to like get the patients doing a lot of
Yeah.
oncology calls to get them into their procedures or their oncology treatments, and also like discharge ones. And she said it was good, but I every time I bring up like remote nursing, it's always like, oh, I don't know if I want to be on the phone all the time. But since you said
Mhm.
like there's certain jobs you probably don't need to be on the phone, so I guess it's all about searching and figuring out the schedule that would actually benefit us.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the first questions that a lot of tell nurses kind of start with is like, do you want phone time, no phone time, or kind of like a mix? Because that can help guide like which type of role might be better for what you're looking for. Um, can't say that all of that would align with maybe other things with like schedule and pay, but if that's like a priority, that's definitely kind of where to start a path to go down. So there are a lot of options, and they're not always fully remote. There's a lot of hybrid jobs too that kind of
Mhm.
give that mix for someone who wants to be on site still with kind of interaction. So there's a lot of different options to look at.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I was talking about this with another person that did like a hybrid job where she was saying just because of the remote aspect of it, she felt like her house was no longer her home because she would
Can be. Yeah.
she was like, "Oh, I'm waking up and I'm actually at work at the same
Hmm.
time." So
Yeah.
it's like, I guess that's one of the cons, but if you're able to isolate that thought, I think that could be really good. Plus, no more commute time. Like we travel 45 minutes to an hour into the city as well. And
Yeah.
then that's like a 2 extra hours on our day of not getting paid. Like you're not
Right.
even getting paid for it. So
Yeah, there's
what
definitely pros and cons to it. It just depends on your perspective and what you're looking for. Mm.
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And then for these like jobs that you help people find, do most of them have like really good benefits, or that's just something you have to research?
I think that that is a very good question too, because like from my experience with most hospitals, when you're comparing it to just hospitals, I think there's
Yeah.
very limited hospitals that actually have good benefits personally, but I know they're out there. There are a few out there, so I'm going to say they're not. So from my experience in looking at the newer startup companies may or may not just because they're trying to get
Okay.
started. So a lot of times
Mhm.
they won't offer benefits, but they could offer really great benefits in the future. I have definitely heard from the nurses, the insurance companies tend to offer better benefits as far as insurance or even just like vacation and opportunities for advancement, increased pay raises every year that you're, more than 2%,
Yeah.
opportunities for bonuses. It is very dependent on like where you're going. And it's one of the things that I do help inside my membership to kind of give them the information. I've done a lot of research to try and tag. So like maybe paid maternity leave is something that's really important to one nurse, but unlimited PTO might be something that's important to another nurse. So I've tried to just give them the tools and information to find those things to break it down. Some people just don't care. They just want to work remotely, and that's fine too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
wondered. Because
Mm.
well, we'll go into why you went into like your entrepreneurship, um, what you're doing. But I guess like the hardest part for I guess someone like my wife, we work in New York City, so we get paid a decent amount of money, and then to
Mhm.
tech a lot of like the remote jobs that we're seeing don't pay the same. And
Mhm.
that's like, even though it's just a number, it kind of like hinders us from like looking at it, because
Yeah.
if you even like do the math, maybe the commuting costs, the parking, and the tolls, car maintenance all probably
Mhm.
equal out the difference of the remote job salary versus our hospital salary.
Right.
But I guess that's like, I guess that's something I'll look into your membership for my wife to try to figure this out. But how did you go into becoming like the remote nurse
Learners.
job specialist? Yeah, like expert on it.
I guess that's just kind of, I want to say not by accident. I was in a membership for Kelsey, a whole life nurse, and she has an amazing entrepreneurship side to her membership. And so when we decided that I would leave my remote job because we with childcare basically, um, I knew that I had other options that I was going to look into. So I do HEDIS abstraction now.
Hmm.
And so I work, most HEDIS abstraction is January, you work January through early May. So it's like full time half of the year. So I was like, oh, I could do part time year round or I could do that. So I actually ended up one that's mid February through the end of April. And it actually works out better for
Oh,
me. You know,
wow.
and not, would not work for everyone, but it does work for us. So it's extremely flexible schedule. And I thought, I could do something else part of the year, but I would really need it to be extremely my time
Hmm.
flexible. And so that's when I kind of started looking at maybe just doing like did like Etsy shop. That's where I started.
I feel like that's where
and
a lot
and
of us started.
yeah, but Kelsey's membership, know that I would not have like scaled as quickly as I did had I not had that beeline like path written out for me of what to follow and saved all of the trial and error that sometimes comes along with a lot of that
Hmm.
entrepreneurship journey. So that's kinda how I got into it, is basically, like, I loved my remote job, but childcare was an issue, and even though I'm at home, it was still not a role that I personally could do while taking care of a young baby, and she's 2.5 now, so still couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Some nurses are able to, and that I think they're superstars, but I know personally that I would not be able to manage what I was doing in that role, taking care of a kid, so that was
Yeah,
just
because you're
how we
still
came.
working.
Oh,
Why-
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're
It's
still
not like it's physically or emotionally draining, but it can be very mentally draining for having to focus on things.
on
So,
multiple things. You're doing your
yeah.
actual job and like, oh, my baby's crying.
Yes. Yeah. Some nurses do it, and they do well and they make it work. I personally would not be able to, just knowing how I am. But even with the start stop, it's hard to like have those interruptions. It is for me to go back to where my train of thought on what I was doing. So that's how I got into that. And so I had helped other nurses, just people that I knew, like in 2020, land some remote nursing jobs. And just going through some of the things in Kelsey's membership, trying to decide what to do. That was like where it landed. So
Like, how did it start?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
like the resume revamping type of thing? I feel like that's like a good starting
yeah.
point that a lot of people start
I
doing.
Yeah, that was definitely a point. But I think it started really with a Facebook group.
Oh, Facebook
I
group.
was like, before, Kelsey teaches a lot with like how to validate your ideas, and that was where it started. Yeah, before I did all of the other parts of it.
Wow. So,
Yeah,
like, going over
yeah,
your website, Remote Nurse Connection, this it's pretty much like it's really clean. I actually like it a lot. And you have
oh,
like a
thanks.
blog connected to it as well, where you go over pretty much everything. And one of that, I was reading it before we got on here, the 25 hospitals and companies that offer IVF coverage for nurses. I think that
Yeah,
is awesome.
it's a question that I saw a lot of nurses wanting like benefits, and that was one of them. And it's kind of hard to find that information, so we just dug in and started putting it out there for nurses that, and I think I have some more coming out for different types of benefits, but that's one of the things that I've done is just research a lot of different companies and pull out those pieces of information that are scattered all over the web.
No, that's great
Yeah.
because like
Yeah.
it's compiling everything on one place where everyone could look up. And like, I guess just because you could have just done your resume revamps or and whatever everyone else does, but you also made like an actual resource center for everyone to look for things. Like, what
Yeah,
made you
it's
want to do the
growing. Yeah.
website?
I think it's my techie skills background. So I was doing I I created I did the first one myself. Don't see the first website, it's gone. You can definitely see it was DIY. So I was doing like job board, and I started seeing like, man, this is kind of difficult to manage just doing it in the Facebook group. And so I did a website myself to help with the job board. And when it started growing, I was like, I feel like I need something a little bit more streamlined because I had DIY'd it myself and it worked, but I wanted something a little bit more put together. And so just pulling in some resources of people to help put some things together. But I've also done a lot of work on that website and still do myself. So I've learned so much along the way of how to do some of that from the other people that have helped me. So I wanted that filter, I guess, experience to be able for people to really nail down what they're looking for because there's so many different job descriptions that are worded
Oh, yeah.
differently, and you look at them, you're like, oh, I don't know, do I have to live here and have this license, or do they take entry level? Is this experience like? And it's just hard to. It was hard to retype out all those things, all the questions in the Facebook group. So I thought if I could put filters on the jobs to help people find them easier, that it might make the process a little bit simpler for them.
Wow, you went like above and beyond for your whole Facebook group.
Well, they were the ones that started it or supported it. So I mean, I think that the job board has been really helpful for people to help with the filters to find what they're looking for. Um, but it's also been helpful for the members to like target, or nurses just to be able to target the specific jobs and not feel like you're just like
Mm.
applying to everything, because just because it's remote doesn't mean it might not be a good fit for you or your experience, or maybe it's just not the right type of job for entry level experience, if that makes sense.
No, I love how you're going
Yeah.
into that because like everyone that I talk to, when I just bring up like, oh, remote nursing, everyone thinks, oh, that's probably like the easiest work or something like around those lines. And then you're saying like, oh, it might not actually be for you. And that's coming
Yeah.
from like
Yeah.
the remote nurse. Like, like it might not be for you. Like your personality might not fit, or that specific job
Yeah.
might not just be it for you.
Yeah.
And how hard is it to actually get a remote job though? Like I see a lot of people having like a tough time getting those.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on your must-haves, your goals. Do you have room to kind of like um, negotiate with yourself of what you can compromise on in the short term?
Mm.
A lot of these, most of these roles can be done on site and hybrid. They're not just unique to remote, but they are more competitive working remote if you don't have experience. It's not about the remote experience per se, but it's about the
Mm.
experience in that particular role. So we can't hit the ground running knowing how to be like a utilization review nurse, because we don't do
Never
those
did it.
things at bedside, right?
Yeah.
So you can do those on site at hospital, and it probably would stay closer aligned with what you're making at bedside. And once you have that experience to leverage for remote work, you definitely can negotiate higher salaries, and you would be able to apply to jobs that are not entry level. So a lot of the jobs you see sometimes with those lower salaries could be the entry level ones, and that's where they're providing training, because it can take 3 to 6 months on average
Oh
to get
wow.
like at production level. If you're doing like CDI nursing, like I've heard CDI nurses can say it can take like a year to feel comfortable. I had a nurse that I worked with who already had experience in medical billing and coding and doing a lot of the auditing that we had done for claims, and she switched to a hospital in CDI, and I kept in touch with her, and she's like, yeah, it's about 6 to 8 months and I'm just now starting to feel like
Oh
comfortable.
wow.
So there is a lot of learning curve to those roles, but once you get comfortable with them, I think a lot of nurses, if you've kind of picked the right path and you're okay with, you know, maybe being at home all day and that's okay with you, then a lot of nurses really like those roles and stay in them. But some nurses do go back to bedside, and that's like perfectly okay. I did it. I went back and forth. Yeah.
Like I actually think that's like a super smart idea because why not try doing this? And then if you don't like it, you could always go back type of thing to like the
Yeah.
bedside. But for
Yeah.
the pathway to, I guess, transition to a work from home job, you said try to like find one similar in your own hospital just so you
Yeah.
could get
For
the
some, yeah.
experience.
You can. So a lot of the nurses that are in like higher cost of living areas that the company is not, like based in that they so most of the pay is kind of based on location, but it really is very dependable, the company, the team, and where you are too.
Mm,
So if you try to find a position that's hybrid or remote, so the hospitals offer remote positions too, they'll generally stay closer to what you're making because it's in that same
because
location.
it's
Does that make
self-sim.
sense?
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And then, like, once you have experience in that role, so you've been a case manager, hybrid or remote at a hospital, and you're like, I want a fully remote at this company because they've got great benefits, you're
Mm,
much more likely to be able to get a salary from what you were already making than you were if you're trying to go to them without case management experience or UR experience,
because
if
you have the
that makes sense.
experience and now you can negotiate.
Yes, in that role. So it's kind of like a new grad nurse trying to go land a job in cath lab or
Yeah.
OR. That it's a lot. It's possible, but they're going to have to maybe compromise with like schedule or
Mhm.
pay or something like that. Yeah.
So that's not something we're taught in nursing school, the negotiating. So,
Oh no.
so how do you like? I know you have the whole course on it, but just like a little snippet on how would you teach or coach someone on negotiating for salary in your like your membership?
I think it depends on where you are at personally, like how you always have to be like, okay, they can say no, right? So you have to
Mhm.
be willing to accept if they say no. Are you okay with that? It's like the first kind of thing, because they can say no and they can withdraw. I'm not saying
Yeah.
they will, but it's a possible. So I think you just need to be aware, like, they can do that. So get to a point where you're comfortable and know your numbers, and that starts with doing market research, market salary
Mm.
research, and kind of knowing that you are know I don't want to say know your work because that's not what I mean, but like know how to market the skills that you have that are transferable for that job and what you're bringing to the team. I think that's really hard. It was for me starting out trying to do these non-traditional roles because I was very clinical focused. And
Mhm.
it's not that your clinical nursing experience isn't valuable, it 100% is, but we have to pull out those different skills of like communication skills or tech skills or something that's applicable to that particular job and like hone in on it so that they know that you're going to be able to hit the ground running and coachable, and you're going to learn this job fast. Does that make sense? It's
That
much more
makes a lot of
likely to
sense.
make them want to negotiate with you to give you a little bit more. It is hard when you don't have experience, so you do have to find that balance of like I say a year. Within a year, are you going to have skills to ask for promotion? A lot of these
Mm.
companies have amazing, jobs that do not get posted that you don't
Oh,
see with really great salaries because they are filled from internal
oh,
positions.
wow.
And I know that personally because I was even promoted when I was out on maternity leave, because I had scaled really fast in that role, but I knew I had targeted that particular role because I knew what the salary would be, once I got 1 or 2 years of experience. And they're starting at 95, 100K plus once you have that experience and that certification. So you just kind of have to decide for you personally where you are. And I think that's where your podcast will come into helping nurses get financially ready to make that
Oh, yeah.
pivot. Are they ready? Can they make that short term 1 year sacrifice to do, I don't know, a 10K pay cut? You don't have to, but it is an option. And if you don't have that option, it can feel like it's completely, off the table.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the hardest part, like, like I said, I had a few other remote nurses, they're like, the sacrifice has to be there where, yeah, you're making more money in the hospital, but if you wanna work from home and you want it to be successful, you're if you have 0 experience, you're gonna have to take the pay cut, and
I don't say have to, but it is an
uh,
option. Is an option. There are other ways around it. Like I said, getting experience on site
oh,
or
yeah.
hybrid is definitely like a way around it, or to just keep applying. Like it's just going to take longer, take a lot longer.
So, last few questions because I know you gotta go soon. What's the difference between, like, a regular nurse's resume versus someone that's looking for a work from home?
Yeah, it would be the clinical aspect of it. So, like, putting things on there, how would I word it? Like,
Like,
a lot of
able to
times
put in
yeah,
IVs.
that's one thing, but, like, and I had this on mine too of, like, you're calling doctors or you're doing follow-up with patients, but you're not putting like the metrics in there and focusing on the skill. So like what is the skill that when you're calling physicians? It's a lot with communication, but it also could be auditing. Are you looking through the medical record to pull out the accurate information that you're communicating during, that phone call?
Oh.
So you'll see a lot of different things like that it's just that's what we do as bedside nurses. It's like, why doesn't we just put that on our resume? They know what we're doing. Like, it makes sense. But when you're looking at the job description, you really want to pick out what is the skill that they're looking for. Is it a tech skill? Is it communication skill? Is it auditing skill? Is it time management skill? Is it detail oriented skill? Like that's the skill that they want to see you translate from what you did at the bedside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Yeah, yeah. And then if you can add metrics, and that's another thing as bedside nurses we don't often do is keep track of uh, the value, like a percentage and numbers and that kind of thing. It just doesn't, we don't
Yeah,
keep track of that, right? It was just no.
just
So
trying to get
that's
the
one
task
thing.
done.
Yeah. So if you see these numbers on your unit committee in the break room, like, hey, we had a 20% decrease in falls in the last 6 months, like those are things you can grab to put on your resume because you were involved in that quality committee on your unit. Maybe you weren't on the committee, but you were involved in it. Or if you were involved in other committees, though there's some data for you to pull in. Another really good place to pull that data from is your annual review from for your manager. A lot of times they'll put those types of statements on there for you to pull from too. So keep track of
Ah.
those things. That's a good tip. Keep track of them. It'll make it a lot easier for you to write that resume when
Yeah,
you're gonna
leverage your
write it in it.
performance appraisals.
Yes, that you got to write it from like a corporate perspective instead of our nursing duties and tasks. So they're still there. Your nursing duties and tasks are still on there. They're just written in a different way.
Jeez. All
Yeah.
right, last few questions. So you said there's like advancement for work from home nurses. How, I guess some people always want to know, how high could a potential salary go if you're like go to
Oh
the top?
goodness. I'm trying to
Or
think
what
of
have you
like
seen at
okay,
least?
like the manager and director levels ones I definitely see are well over 100K. If you get at like maybe a pharmaceutical company or a medical device company that you're really fully remote managing like a team, oh, they're I've seen over 200K for
Wow.
those. But it just depends on like your location. A lot of times you
Hmm.
will see that little asterisk where it says based on location. So I'm just seeing what they're putting in the job description. I'm not like in those roles to know for
Hmm.
sure, but a lot of the roles sometimes just don't get posted. They
Yeah.
get
So
posted
we won't
internally
know.
to see if they can fill. But I do know some companies when I've talked with other nurses that once you start getting up into like mid seniorship level, you definitely should be expecting between 90, at least 90, if not higher, because you've got experience and they don't want you to go somewhere else because you can leverage that experience
And
and find another job somewhere else. Don't be afraid to job hop. I can't tell you how many jobs I've had as a nurse. Just do what you need to do for you, you know? So,
and so Andrea,
yeah.
if anyone wanted to become just like you, work from home, but only a few months out of the year, what kind of advice would you give them?
For a few months out of the year, you could do PRN triage. HEDIS job is definitely abstraction is possibility doing those contract roles. There are other abstraction roles too, but those tend to be like I would say go to the hospital, get experience first because some of those companies don't train for that abstraction, like for submitting data to their registries. So like I think you said you work in cath lab.
Oh
Yep.
yeah, Kathy P
Yeah.
Lab. Yep.
Or any hospital, they're always submitting data to these national registries like NSQIP. There's, maternal fetal health registries. So the data abstraction ones are definitely going to be the most flexible. And if you wanted to just work part of the year, maybe you're part time. But the other ones, I would say, are full
Or full
time.
time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if anyone wanted to ask you or join your membership, how could they get in contact with you?
The website is the best place to just land on there. All the information is on there, remotenurseconnection.com. Or you can find the
Perfect.
Facebook group. We're in the Facebook group too. You can always post a message or just in there, and I'm usually pretty responsive trying to get back to people's questions.
I love it. Andrea, thank you so much for your time. And again, I'm sorry for earlier.
That's okay.
I
We're
know
all
you're busy, so I'll let you go.
okay. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.